This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to the special YouTube edition of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone is guitarist Andrew McKeag. He has spent time, of course, with the Presidents of the United States of America. Fun little band. He has got a new band, the Andrew McKeag Band, and they have a new self-titled CD called the Andrew McKeag Band. Hey, where do you go? And they have a website. Guess what? AndrewMcKeagBand.com, yes. So do check that out. Enjoy this interview, and please support Andrew. Here is the one, the only, guitarist, Andrew McKeag. We are speaking with Andrew McKeag, formerly of the Presidents of the United States of America, PUSA in short. Andrew, pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you've got this album out called the Andrew McKeag Band. I've had a chance to listen to the whole thing, and it is absolutely wonderful. It's got this sort of old school vibe. You can tell that you were a fan growing up of Mountain and Jimi Hendrix and all that. It's rock done the way rock should be done. Talk to me about this first solo album and getting in there and what you were going to try to sort of get across.
Well, first of all, thanks for listening to the entire thing. That's actually something in and unto itself these days. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. That's the stuff I love. That's kind of what I grew up playing, and I can't imagine. Really, I kind of only know how to do that, and I can bend myself a few different directions musically, but I always sort of come back to kind of good old-fashioned classic rock and blues and everything sort of based in that world. And so I guess finally making a record that I was going to put just my name on, I wanted to get as close to what I was really made of as possible. So that was in my mind the goal from the beginning.
Are these songs that have been sort of sitting around on your shelf for a while and you said, okay, it's time, or did you actually sit down and make a concerted effort and say, all right, I am going to write a solo album from top to bottom? Talk to me about the process of getting it put together.
It's a little bit of both, to be honest. Some of those songs were indeed kicking around maybe 10, 15 years ago, but never made it to, either didn't make it out of the studio or didn't make it there in the first place. And then other stuff I wrote during the process of working with this rhythm section that is now my band. And, you know, some stuff I thought would work really good and didn't, but most of it I felt like did. And so what made it on the record was really everything that we rehearsed and created arrangements for as that, you know, process went along. A couple miles from my house, mostly at my drummer's place north of San Diego.
Which, by the way, is a great city. It started off as a fabulous city. Todd Howarth of Fraley's Comet lives down there, so you got to love that. And Ace Frehley lives down there. You know? And
Ace does as well, yeah. I know Tommy Rulon, who works with him.
Yeah, so, you know, and years ago, back in 1996, before you were in the Presidents of the United States, I helped put together a Ace Frehley tribute album where they came on and did the song Shout It Out Loud back in 96 or 97, so a lot of great connections.
Oh, cool,
there.
Right on.
Yeah, great project. The CD's impossible to find these days, but hey, it was a fun time. You went the PledgeMusic route. Talk to me about going that route and what that enables you to do, or what it allows you to do in the sense of sort of creative freedom. You don't have a record company saying, well, we don't hear a single, well, we don't hear just talk to me about working with PledgeMusic and sort of having that, what do you want, a crowdfunding kind of approach to making an album.
Well, that kind of came about in this case because we had done the same thing with the President's last record. And we worked with a friend of mine who also works with Sloan and other bands who have these sort of legacies that need sort of care and feeding. And his name's Jay Coyle, a great dude, real music fan. He lives in Nashville now. And his whole specialty is sort of direct-to-fan marketing, merchandising, you know, kind of telling the band what the fans want and then getting the band to get that part of it done. And the Presidents really needed that at the time, and it was a smashing success for us, way different level financially than what I was doing, but it was a way for me, to do that kind of same thing. Was a way for me to connect with the President's fans that I had won over the years, and also a way to put together some money to get things pressed and released, and get us out of the we made it to the studio. Now what do we do? Stage.
Right. Before I move on to the Presidents here, I do want to talk about the track "Never in My Life," the Mountain cover. You had Brad Whitford of Aerosmith on there, not Cherosmith. That's a whole other band that you did years and years ago.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story that I do want to hear about at some point. I mean, when you when you have a Chero impersonator doing stuff, that's a story.
Yeah, she had a bowl of fruit on her head. I mean, it was bonkers. Yeah.
But hey, but you also have Zakk Wylde, a guy that I just had on my show. Talk to me about working with Zakk and Brad, because they sort of bring very, very different elements to what they do. Zakk, of course, shreds like a son of a gun, and Brad just lays down these tasty hooks that just drive a song.
It was easily the weirdest session ever, but at the same time, those guys are both my buddies at this point, which is also kind of amazing. And you just never know when you're 13 years old where you're going to wind up. But over the years, I got to know those guys as I worked as a road manager for the Experience Hendrix tours. And among the many other jobs that I have and continue to have over the years, working with the Hendrix family exposed me to all these guys. I mean, it was a half dozen buses full of guitar players out for a month, and you get to be pretty tight when you're living in the bus together. And I was the road manager guy. I'd have a radio on, but then I'd get sucked into playing, and we spent a lot of time in the front lounge just talking about music. And you haven't lived until you've been in the front lounge of a tour bus for hours listening to guitar players complain about lead singers and tell stories. And I really bonded with those guys, and they are very different people, and they very much play the way that they are. But there's common ground, I mean, if you've lived this experience and toured and tried to make a living playing music for certainly as long as those guys have, and even I guess at this point, as long as I have, it bonds you in a way. And I talked those guys both into playing on that track. We had a day off in New Orleans, and I got them to come down to the studio that I found, and it really was a fun day. And it was really neat to see how both of their approaches, they both did the same thing. They both just wanted the song played from the top over and over again, and they just ripped solos over the whole thing. And I sat there just like, I can't believe I'm sitting here listening to this. And it's me singing on a song that I love. But it all kind of started with Brad and I having this fondness for the band Mountain, and that particular song was Brad's favorite. I think that's what he told me, at least. And he told me stories about seeing the band live, and we talked about it a lot. And so one day I sent him a text and just said, hey, I want to record Never in My Life, and would you play leads if I did? And he said, yeah. He got right back to me, and then that just turned into, as we're on tour, I was like, God, let's get Zakk down there. The two more different people do not exist, but yet somehow we made it happen.
and it turned out great. Now, the Hendrix Experience obviously toured in 2017. You had Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Dweezil Zappa, Noah Hunt, just Anna Popovic, just a bunch of great, talented people, and a lot more, of course, Zakk and Brad and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know if that's going to move on in 2018? Are they going to sort of rev it up again?
Man, I hope so. I really love doing it. Everybody that does it, it's like a giant summer camp, a rock and roll summer camp. And we'll just see. I think right now they're kind of seeing if they can get it to go again, but maybe add some different players, change it up a little bit. We all kind of wait for the Hendrix family to decide what they want to do. I think for them, it's not necessarily a money maker. It's a labor of love. And if they get busy with other projects or other releases, as I know they are now this fall, they've got some stuff coming out, and this winter. And I just kind of feel like it's really their call. And if once they get fired up about it, then we're all there. And then it's a matter of getting everybody's schedules to match up.
Yeah, which is always exceptionally complicated, especially with Zakk doing an Aussie farewell tour. But talk to me about that.
Well, yeah, Zakk never stops. He just goes, whatever it is that he's doing. He was very inspirational for me even doing this. At one point, he looked over at me, as I was complaining about being in a band with a singer they didn't want to work. He just said, be the singer in your own band. And I always had been, but more as a part-time thing. And he just said, nah, man, you got to build it. You got to build the story. You got to be on Instagram every day. You got to so, you see how he operates. He's a one-man army of just social media and also just plays his ass off and plays all the time. And he's unafraid of the smallest gig or the weirdest little thing. And he's so good with fans. You see him do what he's done. I mean, he took an opportunity with Ozzy and then he built his own career on the side. And I mean, I'm a little behind at 48 years old to start doing it, but I figured, screw it, man. I'm just going to take his advice.
Right. And of course, he built his empire, if you want, on the side out of necessity, because Ozzy did that farewell tour in 92 and said, hey, bye. And Zakk went,
which is funny. It's so weird how the world works, but I met Zakk when I was working at a Tower Records down here when he and Ozzy did an in-store in 92 on that tour. And it's so weird to think back, how those weird connections turn into strange friendships later on.
They really do. It all sort of matters. And, but talk to me about working with the Hendrix family. That's got to be exciting in its own right. I mean, here they've cultured and cultivated and this legacy. I mean, he passed away many, many years ago, and yet in 2017, 2018, he's still relevant. There's, in fact, a new album coming out. What have they taught you, if anything, from the business angle?
Well, I met Al Hendrix when they were celebrating. They did a show in Seattle celebrating the fact that they'd gotten the rights back. And that was in, I believe, 1995. And it was an incredible show where not only Mitch and Buddy Miles and Billy Cox and all those guys played, but lots of other people, John McLaughlin and all these amazing people played this event. But I got to meet Al, getting a beer in the beer tent. And that just was the beginning. I mean, first of all, I never thought I'd meet Al as a huge Hendrix fan when I was a kid. But really, they went into something they'd never done before. Running a record label, running the brand, and I think they learned from trying everything. And Janie Hendrix and John McDermott have been so helpful to me over the years, not only inviting me to work with them on events and certainly to tour manage, or road manage, however you want to put it. But also they let me come up and play guitar, because I have this weird duality where I work behind the scenes and then I work as a guitar player. And they at some point just said, screw convention. We're going to let this dude play a little bit. And I don't even know what to say to that, to be able to put the radio down and put a guitar on and play with these people who are far superior to me, certainly in abilities and record sales. They're a real family operation, and they're so kind and helpful and supportive. So even dumb stuff like I did a version of Can You See Me with my old band in Seattle, and Janie immediately gave me the go ahead to put it on an LP. So little easy stuff like that. And stuff that other people would have to jump through lawyer hoops. They're super easy.
Yeah, they're great. Let's talk quickly about the presidents of the United States of America. You joined the band, or you started maybe doing some shows with them at the end of 2004, become a member by 2005. Talk to me about joining that band and replacing Dave and just sort of getting in, because, at the time they were sort of rebuilding their career. They had broken up, I guess, in 97 for the first... I don't know what you're doing back there, but
it's the last show.
Yeah.
Last show was February of 98, and I was there because I was friends with those guys. And then we thought, okay, well, that's weird. They would quit at the height of their thing, but okay. And then it didn't take long for them to start doing other stuff together again. So they really, although they broke it up, I think it was sort of Chris's way of saying, I want off the hamster wheel. And that became kind of the pattern for that band that ultimately I inherited. I just, I think that band, so talented, so quirky, never the kind of band I thought I would be in. But once I was in it and doing it, initially just to help out because Dave didn't want to tour, it really is a cool band. And both Jason and Chris are so talented and so quick on stage, and really the rapid fire, turn on a dime part of it taught me a lot about how to play music and how to communicate with people in that world.
Yeah, it's an interesting world. Now, one of the things that the band was known for that you got to play was this bass guitar or git bass. Talk to me about that sort of innovation and using that instrument and inventing that instrument and right? I mean, just what is it for crying out loud? Right?
Well, so really what it is the two instruments that are played are both electric guitars. The one that Chris played had two strings, one bass string and then one guitar string, like a 60 and a 30 for those that care about
the technical
gauges.
Folks out there, right?
Yeah. It's two strings. I'm super technical. It's so funny that it works so good. But then the other instrument is three strings, and it would be sort of the low strings on the guitar. And both guitars are tuned to the same pitch, which is like a drop D tuning, but a C sharp. So it's a half step lower than the usual drop D. And this all kind of came about from Chris's time living with Mark Sandman from Morphine in Boston and playing in bands together. And Mark always had this really unique approach to stringed instruments, and that kind of got Chris going on the same thing. And they had a little group together, and it just kind of, when Chris started the Presidents, that's what he wanted. He wanted to do the 2-string, 3-string thing. And it just initially started as a duo with he and Dave Dieter, and they added Jason later. It was really weird to learn. Initially they said, we'd like you to try it. And if it just doesn't work, we can do them in standard tuning if we have to. But I listened to the records really closely, and I was like, God, you got to do it. There's no way around it. And once I had spent maybe a month or 3, I went over to Dave's house initially, and he showed me his fingerings and how he could make a minor chord and how he could do a 7th chord, and with this weird tuning with minimal options. So he really walked me through the hits, like, here's how I do this, here's how I do this on Peaches, here's what I do on, and we just kind of worked our way through everything. So there was a little bit of that, and then a lot of just sitting home and figuring it out. And I was really nervous and scared to do the first gig. But I knew about a week before the first gig, I was like, man, I had a dream where I was playing 3-string, and it like made sense. And after that, I knew I'd done enough woodshedding that it was starting to fall together.
Yeah, just such an interesting instrument.
It's really weird, but it sounds like, the idea is it all sounds like one guitar. The two together, the 5 strings have a full sound.
Right, and then you can have one less band member and
one less person to pay.
Right, one less person to pay. Cut the pie in 4 slices instead of 5. Let me quickly here talk about the first album you did with them. These Are the Good Times, people. The band, like we said, they had huge success in the 90s. They were sort of reestablishing themselves at the turn of the millennium, I guess. What was that like for you? Because now you're going to replace Dave. You're going to be the new sound, the new guy. They're trying to recapture their audience. What was that like for you in terms of just being on the album, the pressure that was exerted on you, or the lack of pressure? Just what was that like, that first album? These Are the Good Times, people. I never
felt a huge amount of pressure. I was just excited to be in a band that was, even if it was pretty much part-time, we were still working, and I was getting paid really well for something I'd always done for almost nothing, playing shows and getting in a van. And it was really gratifying. And they always treated me with a ton of respect, except maybe late at night in the bar. And I think mostly it was just busy playing music. I felt like I was doing what I wanted to do in a very strange way because they were never the kind of band. I'm a blues rock guitar player in this weird, quirky pop punk band. And I think I added a bit of something to it. And I think in a way for that band at the time, I was a yes guy, like I didn't make it any more difficult for them to do things. And they were, prior to that, all three of those guys are real strong-willed, very intelligent, very much not the normal rock dudes, where they just want to party and, and they'll do anything anytime and, send them on tour for 8 months at a time. That's just not that band. I mean, we were reestablishing the band, but it was really part-time. So it felt to me like, God, this is the best part-time job I've ever had in my life, Yeah,
it really was. Kudos to You, of course, comes out in 2014. And then in 2016, Chris takes to the Facebook page and announces that you are that you are.
You did your homework, man.
I always do my homework. He announces that you are way too old. We are old people now, he says. And then he says, well, okay, I'm kidding. We're not too old. But he just sort of calls it the end of the band. But, of course, the band broke up once before. Do you think at some point in 2018 you might, or 2019 you might do this again, or was he deadly serious? Like or even if they do get back together, do you still want to be a part of it?
I think one thing, there's a lot of layers to that question, but it was frustrating for me to have the band end in the way that it did because it was always really part-time. But we had put out a record at the beginning of 2014. We did that pledge campaign where we really did well on the campaign and got a lot of stuff going in a really organic way. And our drummer, Jason, was managing the band at that point, and he was really learning a lot and doing a really good job. And he really put what's left of his heart and his soul into, if you know Jason, he's a bit cantankerous, but he's a good guy. He really put himself into the band, and we did all this work and it was all queued up. And Chris he's sort of mercurial, he just decided he was done. And initially we just agreed that we weren't going to say anything. We were just going to stop at the end of that touring cycle. We were just going to be done. But a year or so goes by and he's just like, I have to say something. Everybody's asking me questions and I have to say something. And I'm like, all right, man, say whatever you want. What I told him at the time, because I was pissed and it affects me financially far greater than those guys. Those guys made a lot of dough when the band was big and sold a lot of records. And I really existed to a certain extent on that touring income. I was mad and I was frustrated. I just moved back to California and I was, I was kind of depending on even the part-time level that we worked to help supplement my family's,
income, right?
Making a living. Yeah. But, at the time I was like, well, you know what, if they did ever get back together, I hope I'm too busy to say yes. I hope whatever I'm doing is because I really was available and I twisted my life around over a dozen years to make sure that I was available part-time for those guys. So I got out of full-time jobs. I, kept things as loose as I could. And I never said no to a show, even if I was sick, I didn't say no to a show. And it was frustrating to have that be the net result. But, you can't control other people. And if somebody doesn't want to be on stage, that's the last place you want to be with them. And I think in Chris's case, he was always very fair to me. He was super supportive. Even now with this whole new record that I did, and they've given me full access to all the social media outlets that we, still have for the presidents. And the bottom line with him is that he doesn't love rock and roll and he doesn't need money. So if those things are both true, being in a band kind of doesn't matter anymore to him,
Wow, that's how can you not love rock and roll? But I guess getting up there and the grind and stuff, because it's, having been on tour and having seen how it goes, it's not as much fun as people think, right? I mean, there's a lot of get up and wait, and there's a lot of miserable promoters, not all, but it happens, and bad weather, and it's,
Oh, dude, Chris himself used to say, he'd say, look, we get paid for the music. We don't get paid. We get paid for the travel. We don't get paid for the music. The music we need for free. And I think that's really true. I think there's a lot of that other stuff. The other 22 hours of the day is what really bummed him out about it. And he'd be somewhere he didn't want to be for way longer than he felt comfortable being there. And he didn't want to get on an airplane to make money. And, if somebody's like that, Jason and I would push him to the edge trying to get him to do more shows, but you just can't. You can't. Yeah. Then they're just miserable. They don't want to be there. You can feel it toward the last couple of shows. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. He doesn't want to be there.
And that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the band. It's not good for the fans. When you see a band really just phoning it in, in the audience, you just go, and so that's no good for anybody. But they have the
last gig we did was in Canada. I was going to say, anecdotally, the last gig we did was in Edmonton.
Well, that'll take your will to live away.
But he said, I remember we did Peaches, and he screwed up Peaches. And we didn't know it was the last gig, but we kind of felt like he was about tapering it off. And he stopped, and he started it again. And it was that moment I was like, oh, he's looking at this as the last time he wants to play that. He's going to play this song live with the president, so he wants to make sure he does it right the last time.
And by the way, I kid about Edmonton. It's a fabulous place for, I guess, malls.
Of course, absolutely.
And of course, you have the live album that came out. Thanks for the feedback that came out at the same time as Kudos to You. So people can always go back and listen to you play on all those old classics, including Peaches. Andrew, an absolute pleasure. And I have to say, the album, the Andrew McKeag Band, was very. How do I put this? I don't want to say surprising because that sounds almost dismissive, but I put it on. I said, okay, let's listen to this. And that first track that's on there, This Old Lie, it just sucks you in. It is so good. And then you move on to Hurricane and all the other. It really is well sequenced, and it draws you in. So just, kudos to you for having put together a great album. And
thanks, Mitch. I appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words, and thanks for the support.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'll see you on the road. Hopefully you'll get out to where I am in Montreal, but I would much prefer to get out where you are in San Diego. the greatest
well, if you're
town.
Ever in my neck of the woods, hit me up.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
See ya.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.